I would be interested to see if there was any rigorous health outcome data showing that vegans who consume low amounts of saturated fat actually have less optimal brain function. Of course, the article provided nothing of the sort, so it seems that the evidence runs quite contrary to what Stephen's author and most likely Stephen think about lack of saturated fat in diet and suboptimal brain functioning. Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be responding to everybody's favorite conservative political commentator, Steven Crowder. This will be the second time I've issued a response to Steven Crowder concerning things like veganism on my channel. If you haven't seen my first response, it will be linked below. Oddly enough, today we will be responding to an anti-vegan article Steven Crowder had published back in 2016. And at the bottom of the article, there is a link to the video I responded to in my first response to Crowder. Now, you may be wondering, why are you covering an article from the year 2016 when it's 2022? Well, I was initially under the impression that this article was fairly new because on September 10th of this year, Steven Crowder made this Facebook post with a link to the article stating, "Meat is delicious, vegans are silly." Seeing as Steven Crowder is still posting the article in 2022, I think it's very likely that he still holds the nonsensical views expressed in the article. This article was written in response to an Instagram post that Chris Pratt made flaunting the dismembered body parts of a deer he decided to murder. Below the extremely alpha male picture was a caption essentially saying that for 1 year he wants to start a diet called The Game Plan, in which he only consumes meat from animals whose lives he has ended himself. Kind of like Jeffrey Dahmer, but with deer. Very pleasant, I know. At some point in the caption, Chris says, "Join me," so he's actually inviting people to join him in his journey of murdering animals for food. How nice. So after a part in the article where the author of the article was just blatantly sucking off Chris Pratt, which by the way is pretty ironic to allow in your article on your site when you consider that Steven Crowder is a person who thinks that states should have the right to not allow gay marriage. But anyway, after sucking off Chris, the author makes mention of many vegans who were angry with Chris's post, essentially promoting the murder of sentient beings. The author begins to mock vegans, saying, "Oh, vegans, when will they learn?" Rhetorical question. Due to the lack of saturated fat in their diets, which is necessary for essential brain function, they are, in fact, incapable of learning. Although the tone of these couple sentences in the article are rather loose and seemingly a joke, it is very clear that it does elicit a general attitude towards saturated fat that the author has, as well as Steven Crowder. Now, many interesting things to point out here. Number one, a vegan diet is not inherently lacking in saturated fat. A vegan can, if they wanted to, drench much of their food in coconut oil, for example, and there's other foods that are vegan that contain saturated fat. And number two, the author of this article did not cite any sources supporting the claim that a diet lacking in saturated fat will lead to suboptimal brain function, but as you have seen or will see in my first video responding to Crowder, he is a big fan of saturated fat and increasing his chances of heart disease. Now, let's be charitable. Perhaps he is under the impression that high amounts of saturated fat does not increase your risk of heart disease. I surely doubt that Steven Crowder wants to raise his risk of heart disease, especially given his latest pectus surgery addressing his connective tissue disorder that is causing his chest to cave in on his heart. So perhaps he is just unaware of the literature on saturated fat and heart disease. But let's get back to the original point that a diet lacking in saturated fat will lead to suboptimal brain function. The irony here is that according to the systematic review and meta-analysis of dietary fat intake and cognitive function among older populations, there is a detrimental association between saturated fat intake and cognitive impairment. I will say, though, that the authors of this paper made note that given the substantial heterogeneity in the sample size and methodology used across studies, the evidence presented in this paper should be interpreted with caution. I found another meta-analysis of cohort studies providing significant evidence of a positive association between higher saturated fat intake and Alzheimer's disease and dementia risk. I even found in the Journal of Neurobiology and Aging that their #1 recommendation to prevent Alzheimer's is to minimize intake of saturated fats and trans fats. And by the way, you can find naturally occurring trans fats in various animal products, which Steven loves to consume. I would be interested to see if there was any rigorous health outcome data showing that vegans who consume low amounts of saturated fat actually have less optimal brain function. Of course, the article provided nothing of the sort, so it seems that the evidence runs quite contrary to what Steven's author and most likely Steven think about lack of saturated fat in diet and suboptimal brain functioning. Let's keep going. The article then says, also an irony, based on the vitriolic hatred seen in the comment section, it would seem that vegans reserve their compassion and love strictly for animals. Humans need not be part of the equation. Now, just because a specific subset of vegans are upset with a specific kind of person who is promoting the murdering of animals to millions of people and who is also, of course, themselves murdering animals, does not mean that vegans reserve their compassion strictly for animals. One can have compassion for animals and humans while also not having compassion for a specific human who is violating the rights of animals. Crazy concept. Just like if a specific human goes on a killing spree, many people who generally believe in human rights believe that the specific human who went on a killing spree does not deserve any compassion. It's very simple. The article then goes on to say that, more important irony, hunters do more for animal conservation than any namby-pamby animal justice keyboard warrior could ever hope to. From keeping animal populations within healthy ranges to ensuring humane killing methods, they do a whole lot more than bitching on a Tumblr post. Now, of course, he provided no evidence in the form of a comparative analysis assessing the impact of a vegan versus a hunter on animal welfare or animal rights. But anyway, apparently the author of the article, and very likely Stephen by extension because he shared this article to his Facebook page, think that a bullet to the heart, the heart of a deer who didn't want to die, who probably has a family, is a humane way to live. It's benevolent. It's the way we'd want to treat humans, when in reality, we would never do this to another human and be like, oh, that was so humane. Now, in response to the claim that hunting deer actually keeps deer in a sort of healthy population range, I've never seen this claim substantiated. I've only heard it made by people like Crowder or, wildlife agencies who profit off of providing hunting licenses to hunters who want to go ahead and murder deer. But it seems to make sense at face value, right? Like, oh, there's so many deer, so let's kill a shit ton of them so that we can keep the population at a healthy range. But with the way conventional hunting is done, which is done in a sex-selective fashion involving the deliberate hunting of a mature male deer, or bucks, there may actually be reason to believe that hunting in this way increases overall deer populations. Here is a bite-sized vegan video explaining how.
Now moving on to the second source of artificially overabundant deer populations, the practices of hunters themselves. Conventional deer hunting is all about killing mature male deers, or bucks, with large antlers, leaving the female deer, or does, alone. A single buck can breed with multiple does, so while hunting reduces the number of male deer, it does not reduce the number of offspring. In fact, it increases it. This sex-biased hunting skews the natural 1-to-1 ratio of male to female deer to as high as 1-to-8, meaning 1 male deer for every 8 females. Let's say that an area has 500 deer and each doe produces approximately 1.4 fawns, as 67% of mature does have twins. In a natural 1-to-1 ratio, this would yield 350 new fawns. Now, take that same 500 deer herd at the hunting-induced 1-to-8 ratio, and you now have 622 new fawns, almost 300 more than the 1-to-1 herd produced. Simply put, hunting deer creates more deer.
So we're about at the end of the article, and again, at the bottom he links a video I've already responded to, which involves Lear Keith, a supposed ex-vegan. If you are interested in watching that, please click the link in the pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you support my work and want to get early access to content as well as other perks, you can click the link below and support me on Patreon. And if you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you can hear online, as well as the debunks for them. So if you want that as well, click the link in the pinned comment. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude.
Fuck off, I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
Even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,